joining us for another week of Ask Stacy and Amanda on Facebook Live. We are live every single Tuesday, usually at 2:30, sometimes at other times, depending on what comes up. But make sure that you like us here on Facebook as well as over on Twitter and Instagram. You never know what kinds of giveaways or other cool information we might be putting on there. Today we are live, surprise, at the University of Mary. I'm sure you couldn't tell. And we are joined by Dale Lennon, who's the athletic director here. So thank you for joining us today, Dale.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks. And today we are going to be talking about what it takes to become a successful student athlete. I know a lot of students, I hear a lot of students when I'm out in the schools, or even parents who mention that their student would like to play sports at the college level. So Dale, can you tell us a little bit about what a typical schedule looks like for a college student or a college athlete during their season?
Well, during the season, it's a full day, and it usually starts at 6 a.m. Some type of training will be involved, usually strength training, and at that point in time, they'll probably go through an hour and a half type workout, and then naturally you got to get cleaned up for the day, go over, get some nutrition, and then you're off to classes. So an average class day, maybe 2 to 3 classes during the course of the day. In between there, you have to find time for lunch, maybe have a little rest time, but then get ready for practice. And for some sports, there's meetings before the practice, so those meetings will start at about 2 p.m. And then by the time you're on the field, it's right around 3:30, and then that'll go through your practice time, which will be right around that 5:30 to 6 o'clock mark. After that, then it looks time to eat again.
Yep.
Make sure that you get the fuel. And then in the evening is usually your study time. So a lot of the programs have a study table where the athletes will then go and receive some academic help, or just find some time to study with their classes to prepare for the next day.
Wow. So it seems like a student schedule, especially when they're in season, is very demanding. A full day. It's
a full day, and it's set up so it is a routine. So they get used to that every day. As far as going through it, they know how to manage their time, which is extremely important. And but they need to be committed to that schedule to make it work.
Absolutely. So how about when a student is or an athlete's in their off season? I'm sure it's not as demanding, but it's not like, okay, you're done with your sport, you're done with whatever. They, especially at certain divisions of athletics, they go year round, right?
But the commitment now is 24/7, 365, and that's one thing that if you want to be a college athlete, understand that this is a full-time commitment. It's just at a competition level where the demands are so high, you need to be that committed to it. And it's tough to be a multi-sport athlete too nowadays. Some athletes are talented enough where they can do it, but most will commit to one sport. And that 24/7, 365, there's different seasons that they go through, so the intensity isn't the same all the way around. But that's something that the coaching staff will prepare for them, and they'll have a monthly schedule that they'll go through that'll be changed up with each different training cycle that they're in.
That is super intense.
It is. It's but it's also it's rather addicting. It's something that the athletes, first time that they go through that first year is always challenging because it's everything is brand new and they don't know what to expect. But then it becomes to at a point where you kind of welcome that schedule and you look forward to the next cycle and the next challenge, and that's just the competitive nature of a college athlete.
So you kind of touched on some of the commitments that a college athlete needs to expect when they're coming in. So having that routine, being committed to their sport, having it be a 365, 24/7 thing. What other kinds of commitments should high school, especially high school seniors who are now thinking about where they're going to school next year and have thought about being a college athlete, what other kinds of things should they kind of think about before they're like, yeah, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, well, the big thing, if you're in high school, considering the opportunities of being a college athlete, you really got to take care of your academics. And that starts by registering with the clearinghouse, the NCAA clearinghouse. And that will basically take a look at your academic records that you've had throughout your high school career, make sure that you're on progress to be eligible to be a college athlete, which means you have to take so many math classes, so many science classes. This is something that the high school counselor should be aware of and can help guide the potential student athletes along the way. But if you're deficient in any of those, that would be one reason why you'd be ineligible to go to the college level. So academics is extremely important at the high school level. And then taking the ACT and the SAT test. There's certain levels that you need to be at to be declared eligible. And there's times when you will have student athletes have to take it 2-3 times before they get that certain number, which isn't uncommon. So just to become a college athlete does require some preparation.
Okay. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit in regards to the clearinghouse, the NCAA clearinghouse. Students who are at a certain level in certain divisions in athletics, they have to do a little bit of extra work than just to get it admitted to the school, right, in regards to paperwork.
Right, and that's where every level's a little different. You know, the different levels that you have in college athletics, Division I, Division II, there's similarities between those two because we're dealing with athletic scholarships. There's Division III, which is a non-scholarship level, but you still have NCAA standards that you need to meet. And then there's the NAIA. Now the NAIA is something different than the NCAA. The standards are similar but not quite the same. So even there, with the student athlete being recruited, they need to know what levels looking at them and then what are the requirements of each level.
So it sounds like there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of stuff that maybe the typical high school student, oh, I've heard of, you know, NCAA and I know about a little bit about this, but there's a lot more that goes into it. Who helps the student navigate that whole thing? Because it adds an extra layer of complexity to the entire college admissions process.
The recruiting process is confusing, and that's the one thing that we'll get quite a bit as coaches, where a family will say, we've never been through this, we don't know what's happening next, and that help starts at the high school level, and that's where if the high school has a qualified counselor that knows what the requirements are, that's a big help. In fact, that's where they're making sure that the classes that the individual needs to take, that they're being taken, and that they're on progress with the grades that they're receiving. But once the student athlete starts to be recruited, and that's when the coaches come into play. The coaches are trained that they'll immediately look at all the numbers, all the academic records that exist on the student athlete, and start evaluating, is that individual on course to be eligible? And if they're deficient, they'll make the recommendations, you need to take these courses at this point in time. So, you know, the coaches will be a very good ally as far as walking you through that admissions process. And then if the student athlete commits to a school, then that coaching staff will really take interest. And, and you know, at that point in time, you know, they won't let them fail. They'll make sure that they get the stuff that they need to have done, be done.
So it sounds like student athletes have a lot of support all the way around, from their coaches, from the academic staff, from their professors. Speaking of professors, so student athletes, especially at a certain level, they are on the road a lot for games. What kinds of things do you see that students do to keep up with their academics while they're traveling for their sport?
And travel's probably one of the more challenging things that happen for the student athlete, depending on the sport. There's some sports that are gone more than others, but that's where the student athlete really needs to develop a relationship with the professors. That's what we tell them to do. Day one, first class, day of class, go up, introduce yourself to your professor, make sure you explain what your sport is and the travel demands that sport has, and then work with that professor too to make sure that the requirements that they're going to have for the class are met, and that the professor knows that you're going to be willing to do what they ask of you to help meet those demands. So we do put a lot of responsibility on the student athlete to initiate that contact. And then after that, you know, it does go to the coaching staff, also needs to be aware of those requirements that are made by the professor, and then the professor and the coaches kind of work hand in hand to make sure that the academic progress is made.
Yeah. So, especially, when they're on the buses and hotels, I bet students aren't just, sitting there talking with their teammates about this and that and the game and all of that. I bet they have their books open and they're studying and all of that kind of stuff, right?
You have to, to stay on top of your classes, you have to find time on the bus, you have to find time in the hotel room to do the work. And sometimes that's the best time to do it. You're kind of away from your dorm room or your apartment, and you could have some very positive alone time to actually get some study time done. Also on the road, there's times when our coaches will even serve as a proctor as far as giving a test from a class, and you just try to adapt the best you can, and try to make sure that the student athlete stays on top of the classes the best they can. And it's not ideal all the time, but you make it work, and that's the thing you kind of learn too as a student athlete. You find a way to make things work.
Yep, and that comes right back to that passion and that commitment. They're passionate about their sport, they're committed to the sport, but also to being a student, which is really great.
It is, and it's also a social life. So that's the one thing. I probably painted a picture of a Spartan-like existence of nothing but academics and athletics, but there's that social component too that's extremely important, and the relationships that you make with your teammates, those will be lifelong relationships. The people you meet on campus, it's a great atmosphere to be a part of, and that's why you see a lot of people referring to their college days as some of the most enjoyable times of their lives. Well, it's just because of the social component, which we want to make sure that our student athletes have that element too within their experience.
Absolutely. So Dale, what advice would you give to a high school student who is considering becoming a student athlete while they're in college? Anything that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, the thing would be, number one, make sure your grades are in order. That's probably something, when they're a 7th, 8th grader, they're not really thinking that, I'm going into high school here, I gotta make sure my grades are gonna be good, but that's what you gotta do. If the grades aren't there, there are so many talented athletes that never get an opportunity to play just because they haven't taken care of the classroom work in the high school level. And then it's just kind of learning, how to manage your time. At the high school, your time is somewhat structured, but make sure that you're developing good study habits, to make sure that you're developing good training habits, and knowing the importance of sleep and nutrition and all those things that can give you a head start when you come into the college scene.
For sure. Good. So yeah, that is all that I have today. That's the best tips on how to be a successful student athlete. I'm looking, I don't think we have any comments, but if you do have any questions, any comments, anything that you want to know about being a successful student athlete or being a successful college student in general, go ahead and leave us a comment below or send us a direct message, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much, Dale, for letting me interview you today, and thank you, the University of Mary, for welcoming the Bank of North Dakota back to campus. I know I always really love coming out here, so we really appreciate it. So,
well, it's been great. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Dale.